Who is better, the Seattle Seahawks or the Philadelphia Eagles? In this video, I will break down each roster, compare each position, and tell you who is the more talented team going into Sunday's wild card game. Before I break down each roster, each position, make sure you do Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos and breakdowns just like this, and comment below your opinion. I want to hear from you guys. Who do you believe is the more talented team, the Eagles or the Seahawks? This is not a prediction or a preview on who is going to win, but simply an analysis on both teams' roster. Let's kick off the who is better between the Seahawks and the Philadelphia Eagles with the quarterback position. This is an awesome matchup. Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz, two quarterbacks who I believe carry their offenses. Carson Wentz, I would say, is actually the better of the two right now going into this game in terms of he is hotter at the moment. He's playing better football at the end of the regular season. But you can't discount the playoff experience and clutch factor of Russell Wilson. That's the reason I'm giving Russell Wilson the edge going into this wild card game. Russell Wilson has been to 2 Super Bowls. Russell Wilson knows what it's like playing in a huge playoff game, even on the road. Russell Wilson, 4,100 yards, 31 touchdowns, only 5 picks this year, and a 106 passer rating. Had the better season of the two quarterbacks. Again, I really like the way Carson Wentz is playing at the end of this year. And I would not be shocked if he outperformed Russell Wilson, specifically if this game does become a little bit windy and weather does become a factor, where I believe Carson Wentz might be a little bit better in those conditions. But I have to give Russell Wilson the edge. He continues to find ways with his 2-minute drill, which is arguably the best in the game right now, and his clutch factor to continue to win these tight, close games, game after game after game. So I'm going to give the quarterback position to the Seattle Seahawks. At the running back position, I'm siding with the Philadelphia Eagles. This is actually one of the only positions that Philly doesn't have a huge major injury at. Miles Sanders has been a dynamic playmaker for the Eagles, not only as a runner, but also as a receiver. Really, since his receivers have gone down, Carson Wentz has looked to Miles Sanders as that big-time playmaker with swing passes, routes out of the backfield, screens, whatever it may be. Miles Sanders, 50 catches on the season, very quietly becoming one of the favorite targets of Wentz. 509 yards receiving. You add 518 yards rushing and 4.6 yards per carry. One of the best last halves of the season for any rookie across the NFL. I like him coming into this game. He is a little banged up, but Miles Sanders is probably the most explosive playmaker on the Eagles offense. You add in Scott, who's been a nice addition to this backfield, 245 yards, 5 touchdowns on the season. Jordan Howard is coming back, 525 yards, 4.4 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns. He'll add a little bit of a power element to the backfield in this game when they want to go a little heavy offensively. Seattle, they have a lot of injuries at this position. You know, Chris Carson, he's a great back. He's not there, right? Rashad Penny, first-round pick, not there. Had a huge touchdown in that game versus Philadelphia the first time around. Now they have Homer and Lynch. Homer's actually been a pleasant surprise. 18 attempts, 114 yards, 6.3 yards per carry. Lynch, he's going to be that short yardage guy. He's not what he used to be, but he will be able to execute those 1, 2, 3 yard runs when Seattle does need it. I'm going with Philadelphia at the running back position. I just think they have more depth and also more dynamic players. At the wide receiver and tight end position, I have the Seattle Seahawks. Their group is far superior in my opinion at this point in time, given that the Eagles have so many different injuries at the wide receiver position. When you're looking at Philadelphia, Greg Ward is their leading receiver. You have guys like Burnett and Arcega-Whiteside also contributing. But this is a team that wants to mostly go with 2-3 tight ends on a given play. Zach Ertz may not even play in this game, which is very concerning, but if he does, he's proven to be the go-to guy for Carson Wentz. 88 receptions, 916 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the season. Dallas Goedert has been really good this year, and I would argue he's a top 10 tight end in his own right. 58 receptions, 607 yards, 3 touchdowns, so that's a nice duo there. Perkins as well is added to the mix as their third tight end. You'll see him a lot, especially with Ertz being banged up. But Seattle has the more dynamic wide receiver group for sure. They have a ton of speed. Lockett is one of the fastest receivers in the entire NFL. 82 receptions, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. Hasn't been as good as of late, though. I really like DK Metcalf as their number one, and to really have a big game in this one. Metcalf, 58 receptions, 900 yards, 7 touchdowns on the year. They also have Moore, Brown to add a little bit more speed, downfield threat. They do fit Russell Wilson and what he likes to do in the passing game and really fits the Seattle scheme passing-wise. Jacob Hollister has stepped up with the injuries at tight end and been effective. 41 receptions, 349 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He is not as good as Goddard or Ertz, but he is a pretty reliable tight end option for Seattle. I like the Seahawks overall. They have 2 dynamic receivers, and they have a tight end who is at least reliable. So I'm going to go with Seattle over Philadelphia at the wide receiver and tight end positions. Now, the offensive line. This is clearly Philadelphia. Even with the injuries that they do have, with Brooks, who's on IR now, they still have a far superior offensive line, whether that's run blocking wise, pass blocking wise. Doesn't really matter. They should be getting Lane Johnson back at right tackle, who's one of the best in the game, if not the best right tackle in all of football. Jason Peters, one of the best left tackles still, even at his older age. Kelsey is, in my opinion, the best center in the game. So they have a really good offensive line. They're able to overpower teams in the run game, able to protect Carson Wentz. And if they do, the Eagles have a chance to win this game. Pryor has been the one at right guard to replace Brandon Brooks. For Seattle, they're going to be without their best offensive lineman in this game. Dwayne Brown is not going to be playing. He's out. So they're going to have Fant most likely play left tackle. Affetti plays right tackle. Fluker is okay at guard. Hunt actually is ranked as their best offensive lineman according to PFF, only at number 33 in their center rankings. So Seattle still struggles on the offensive line. I do think they're a pretty good run blocking line, but when it comes to pass blocking, definitely the worst of the two versus Philadelphia. So Eagles clearly the better offensive line and should dominate up front. Flipping to the defensive side of the football, starting off with the big boys in the middle, the interior defensive linemen. I personally like the Philadelphia Eagles interior a little bit more than the Seahawks. Even though the Seahawks have more depth than the Eagles at this point in time, mostly due to the injuries the Eagles have, I am going with Fletcher Cox, period. Fletcher Cox ranks as the 7th best defensive tackle in football according to PFF this year. 31.5 hurries this season, 3.5 sacks. Timmy Jernigan is also there for Philadelphia still. A very key player in the past for the Eagles. A great duo at stuffing the run. But then you have Fletcher Cox, who can take over a football game. And the Seahawks simply don't have that type of playmaker in the interior of their defensive line. I like some of their guys. Jerron Reed has been a staple in their pass rush. Ford has had a pretty good season. Jefferson plays on the outside, inside, little bit of mixing it up there from the Seahawks on the defensive line. They have some depth at this position, but I just don't see that clear-cut stud that the Philadelphia Eagles have, so I'm going to go with the Eagles and Fletcher Cox. On the edge, it gets even more interesting and very, very close. I think the best player is Jadeveon Clowney. They also have okay depth, but really nothing special. I think Ezekiel Ansah is really a name more so than a talent at this point. 2.5 sacks on the season, constantly banged up and injured. And the same can be said for Jadeveon Clowney, but Clowney, when he's on the field, can take over a game, specifically in the run game where he's super disruptive. 38.5 hurries this year, getting after quarterbacks. Remember that 49ers game where he basically won the game for the Seahawks. Green is also not a bad depth player with 4 sacks on the season, but I like the Eagles a tad bit more, specifically the trio of Graham, Barnett, and Curry. I think that's a very solid trio. Graham, 8.5 sacks, which would lead both teams. 17th ranked by PFF. Curry, 23rd ranked. 5 sacks, 19.5 hurries on the season. Curry has always been kind of a solid run stuffer, but has actually been a better pass rusher this season than really a couple years ago when he played for the Eagles. Sweat is also there with 4 sacks. So I like the 4 players the Eagles have a little bit over the trio that the Seahawks possess, but it's very close. I could see you going with the Seahawks. I'm also taking into account that Jadeveon Clowney probably isn't 100%. So I'm going with the Eagles just slightly at the edge position. When you take a look at the sack rate, that's also a determining factor. Philadelphia ranked 16th, and this Seahawks ranked 30th. At the linebacker position, I think this one's very easy. It's the Seahawks. Bobby Wagner is still one of the best in the game with 159 tackles on the season, ranking 12th by PFF. Maybe he's not the best linebacker, period, in the game this year. Maybe he's just in the top 3. He's still elite. He was still an all-pro this year. You could still argue he's the best. He's very good versus the run. He's kind of struggled a little bit more in coverage this year, which is surprising. But nonetheless, Bobby Wagner is a dynamic linebacker, very smart, very physical, fast. He has everything. KJ Wright, extremely intelligent linebacker, doesn't have the same physical tools that Bobby Wagner has, but still a good player and plenty of experience. Michael Kendricks is banged up. I'm not sure if he's playing in this game, but he does rank 36th by PFF this year at the linebacker position. All 3 linebackers rank in the top 40 for Seattle. 71 tackles, 3 sacks by Kendricks. He's a little bit more of a rangy backer, playing for the Eagles in the past, good in coverage, good blitzer, just all-around solid player. Then you flip to the Eagles. They've had some injuries at this position. Jerry has stepped up. 2.5 sacks, 72 tackles. Bradham has been the constant force for them, even going back to their Super Bowl season. 31st by PFF this year, their highest ranked linebacker. Overall, Seattle is the best at this position, and most of it is because of Bobby Wagner. The secondary is probably the weakest position for both defenses. That's why it was so difficult to decide, okay, who has actually the better secondary? In my opinion, it is Seattle, and this is why. They have the best corner of the 2 teams. That is Griffin. He ranks 10th this season by PFF, actually having a pretty decent season as the number 1 corner for Seattle. Besides that, though, Seattle has been not very good in the secondary. I mean, they've been susceptible to the pass all season long. They've been giving up big games all season long, but so have the Philadelphia Eagles. The one guy that I think Seattle is really counting on in this game is Diggs, who they traded from Detroit for to really help the slot corner position, to help that third safety role. He plays a little bit in the box sometimes. He plays a little bit of slot. He plays kind of all over the place for Seattle's defense. Very essential player on pretty much all downs, and he hasn't been there every single game since being acquired. So he is going to have a major impact in this game. Healthy he should be in the wild card round. Outside of that, though, Flowers has been disappointing at the number 2 corner spot. McDougal, not been very good at safety. Then you flip it to the Eagles. Mills has not been great. Douglas has been even worse. Jones has actually come up with a couple of plays here and there. Jenkins is a very solid safety still. Not maybe elite like he used to be, but really smart, good in the box, great tackler, leader. The Eagles, they just really can't play a ton of man. Neither team can because none of them have great corners. I think personally it's Seattle, but you could argue Philadelphia. It's tough. I don't know. Both these secondaries kind of suck if you ask me. With all the injuries in this game on offense and on defense, the team that has a better special teams might actually come out with the win. When taking a look at the starting field position for both teams, Seattle is actually the superior team, ranking in the top 6, both as offensive starting position and defensive starting position. Philadelphia has not been so great in that area. 16th offensively, 19th defensively. So Seattle does have the advantage in where they get the football. A lot of that is because of their punter, Dixon, who is the better of the two punters in the game, ranked 17th by PFF this season. In terms of kickers, I would give the advantage to Elliott of the Eagles because he's shown that he can be clutch in certain moments. Big kicks for the Eagles over the past few seasons. He ranks 14th by PFF this year, 84.6 percentage, 22 for 26. Myers is not bad, but he's not having a great season, ranking 23rd by PFF, 23 for 28, 82% kicking the football. I'm going with the Seahawks at the end of the day on special teams because they have the better starting position, they have the better punter. The returning is fairly even. The kicker, I would side with Philadelphia, but overall still goes to Seattle. And the last category, a matchup between two former Super Bowl winning head coaches. Pete Carroll for the Seahawks, Doug Peterson for the Eagles. I am going with the Eagles. Doug Peterson. Big reason here. Boldness. Doug Peterson makes very bold play calls, and often they pay off. I also really like the way Doug Peterson prepares his offense. For Pete Carroll, he doesn't really have much of an impact on the actual schematics of the Seahawks going into a given playoff game, and is very much the same game after game in terms of what the Seahawks are going to do, how they're going to try and attack you on offense, how they're going to try and beat you on defense. I like Doug Peterson with a couple trick plays, with a couple things up his sleeve, and a way to attack a defense like Seattle. I'm going with Doug Peterson over Pete Carroll for the coach that I like in this game. Overall, 6-5 would be the final score for Philadelphia, as they do get the slight edge because of home field advantage. When you're looking at just the teams in general, 5-5, tie. This might be the closest matchup we have all weekend, all wild card weekend, but at the end of the day, the home team gets the slight little advantage because of that home field advantage. Thanks guys for watching. If you enjoyed, Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. It's Mitch. Peace out.